today what I would like to do is go over how to make a basic granny square. This is going to be the completed project, and once we have enough of these, we're going to put them together in a join as you go blanket that's about the size of a baby blanket or a toddler blanket. So I'm the Frugal Stitcher, and I like using basic value yarn. The kind of yarn that I'm using today is the Big Twist value yarn, and this is going to need an H-sized hook, which is a 5mm, which I have here, and it is in the color Pale Peach. So I was commissioned a project to make a baby blanket with this color, and I had some left over, enough to make another full-size baby blanket. So I thought, let's do that. And I wanted to make it pretty simple because I don't think that baby blankets need to be very complicated, especially if you're doing it in a rush. So for this project, what we're gonna need, this is all that I have left of my Pale Peach, this one little ball that I wound myself. So I've got my Pale Peach yarn, I've got a pair of scissors, I've got my 5mm crochet hook, and I've also got a needle. We're gonna sew in our ends, and I've got a measuring tape to see how it all turns out at the very end. All right, but first, all I need right now is I need to get my yarn ready, and I'm gonna push this out of the way, and we're gonna get started with our first granny square. All right, so we're getting ready to make our magic circle or magic ring. What I like to do is lay the strand across my palm so I have like a nice tail here. I'm gonna secure it, and I'm gonna tuck it over 2 fingers and then wrap it around my 3rd ring finger. So I'm gonna go under here, pull through, twist, go under that working yarn, pull through, and now I have a chain. So that's the first chain. We're gonna chain 2 more. So this is gonna be our first double crochet, and it's gonna be a chain 3. You'll see that I have this tail that's sort of woven in with our ring. We wanna work over the tail, but this is my method, and I think it works pretty well to create a very secure inner granny square with no visible hole. So I'm just gonna make 3 double crochets, and if you're unfamiliar with a double crochet, you're gonna yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull through 2, and pull through 2. And then we're gonna chain 2 to create a corner. So those first 3 double crochets, this chain counts as 1 double crochet, is going to create a cluster, and that's a granny cluster. So after we make our corner with 2 chains, we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to yarn over, insert, pull through 2, pull through 2. So that's 1, yarn over, insert, pull through 2, pull through 2. That's 2. Wow. This seemed like a good idea in theory. Let's pull from this end. Okay, and then if you're unfamiliar too with tension, what I'm doing is I'm swooping my pinky under the working yarn, and then turning my palm over and placing the working yarn over my index finger. So I have it wrapped around 2 fingers. This creates tension, but still allows the yarn to move smoothly through my hands. Okay, so again, we're yarning over, insert, pull through 2, pull through 2. Now this isn't a very tight stitch because I'm using the appropriate sized hook for what the yarn demands, according to the package. If you wanted to create an even tighter look, you could go down a few sizes. So the lowest you might want to go is a size 4 hook. But I like it to have a little bit of, I don't know, I think it drapes better when you have a blanket that's a little looser instead of so tight, and it doesn't feel as heavy when you have a completed finished blanket. Like, I know some people really like the no hole look, and you can create a modern solid granny square with no holes, that's fine. But I think the purpose of making a traditional granny square with clusters is that the blanket that you end up producing has holes in it, and it's more breathable. And so it feels a little lighter. It's a good summer blanket, I think. Okay, and so we're finishing up our magic ring, and I'm still working over that tail, which is right here, and I'm going to pull it forward because this is going to be the fun part at the end when I've finished my fourth cluster. So a granny square always has 4 clusters, and in the chain space you can chain 1, you can chain 2, you can chain 3. I prefer to chain 2. So now I've reached my final cluster. I'm going to chain 2. And now with this tail, this is the trick. Before I join my chain to my initial cluster, I'm going to look at this tail and I'm going to place my palm underneath the clusters with my thumb over where I'm pulling the tail from. So I can feel this yarn cinching and cinching. It's going to get to a point where I can feel it almost like snap into place. And I don't know if you're going to be able to hear it, but I'll try to be quiet so that you can see. I'm just pulling this yarn as tight as I can. Okay, hold on. Okay, it sounded like a little bit like a zipper. And you can see an even teeny tiny little hole, teeny tiny little hole. So I would pull it even further. And you can really hear the yarn like stretching against itself. You can hear it. So this is definitely a tight cluster. I can move it a little bit and create a hole. So I'm just going to keep pulling, trying not to break the yarn. It's pretty good strength though, so I don't think I can break it. But this feels really secure to me. And you're going to further secure it at the end when we go to sew in our tail. And you're going to sew it in the direction of which you've been doing your crochet stitches. And so it's going to wrap around itself and around itself and around itself until it's like really tight. And then you can feel safe in cutting off that end. But we'll get to that in a moment. And since this is a solid color granny square, we have really only 2 ends to weave in at the end. So that's what makes this a really easy project. All right, so now we've gotten to the point where we're going to join our chains to the first double crochet. That's the chain 3 that we made as our first double. So we're looking at the legs. So we've got 3 legs here and 3 V's on top. There's 1 V, 2 V, and then this one is the 3rd V. I don't feel that it's necessary to push and pull and tug and try to get into that side so that it looks just like the V here. I think you can just go straight into the center. And as long as you're picking up at least 2 strands, here I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to push through, and now I have 2 strands. You can see, we'll separate them. There's the 2 strands. Okay, so now I'm going to yarn over this working yarn, pull through, and we're going to slip stitch into that last chain, and then we're going to chain up. Now, at this point, we're starting to create the full granny square. I don't feel it's necessary to chain 3. I start by chaining 3 because sometimes when you pull this working yarn really tight, it pulls the chain 3 down into the circle. So it's a little hard to find if you only do 2 chains. So this again is going to count as 1 double crochet. Now what I'm going to do is yarn over, and I'm going to stretch over to this other corner. So we're just working in the corners because that's the only spaces we have. Pull through 2, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2, and then make our corner, because you are in a corner. You have to make a corner when you're in a corner. All right, and then after those 2 chains, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2. Okay, so we've made 1 corner, and now we're going to yarn over and again jump to this next corner. yarn over, pull through two, pull through two. As you'll notice, I'm not creating any spaces in between the granny squares on the sides. I'm just going directly from corner to corner, and I will not create a chain space between the sides where they land on the sides. I have to create a corner here, so I'm doing chain two. And then sometimes what you would like to do too, if your tension is really tight and you don't have a lot of space to make your next cluster in your corner, just slide these guys over, push their legs down a little bit, and then you have more space to work in. Yarn over, pull through two, pull through two, yarn over, pull through two, pull through two, yarn over, pull through two, pull through two. Now we have two corners, yarn over. Again, we're going to go straight into the next corner, no chains. We're going to make our next granny cluster, and after we have 3 double crochets, we're going to make that chain 2. All right, again, I'm going to scooch those legs down a little bit, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2, do that 2 more times. All right, and now we're getting to our last corner. Yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2. Okay, and I just made our 2 chains for a corner. Now, I only have to make 2 more legs of this granny cluster because I already have one from before that stretched to make this next cluster. So I'm gonna yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2. And now I can see these 3 legs have their 3 V's on top. So this chain space right here is going to be the one that I want to go in. So I did 2, I know I did 2, so that's 1, 2. And the next one belongs to this leg. Don't go in there, go in here. And that's a slip stitch. And then we're going to chain 2. Okay, so at this point you can kind of like stretch it out and you can see, oh yeah, this is definitely turning into a square. I am here on a side now. So what I'm going to do is yarn over, go into the space, pull through 2, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2. And now I have 1 cluster on the side. I'm going to yarn over and make a corner. Now what I'm going to do is just do the same thing, no spaces in between. I'm going to yarn over, go directly into that space, create my first double crochet, my second double crochet, my third double crochet, and now I'm going to go into the corner, make another corner. When you're in a corner, you have to make a corner. All right, and now I'm going to make a side. Yarn over, make another corner. Chain 2. Yarn over, make a side. And then I'm going to make my final corner. Chain 2. my final cluster of this round. Okay, and now because there are no spaces between any of my clusters except at the corner, I have made my final leg of this cluster. I'm going to join it directly to the top of this first leg, which was our chain 2. So we can see again, we've got our legs here and our V's. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just insert directly into the center of the V, picking up those 2 strands at the back, and then pull through for a slip stitch. Oops. And sometimes value yarn can split a little bit. So, you know, it's no big deal. That's why it's value yarn. But the best thing about value yarn is that once you wash it, it's incredibly soft. All right, so we're on round 1, 2, 3, 4. So we've made it to round 4. At this point, if you want to and you feel like it's too round, your square isn't square enough, just stop and pull and tug a little bit to make it slightly more square. All right. And if you do crochet very tightly, then you probably will need to block your squares at the end to get them back into proper shape. If you crochet a little bit loosely like this, it's not really necessary to block your items when you're finished. All right, so I just did a chain 2 for my first double crochet, which at the end of this round, we're going to come back and do 2 legs to finish off this double crochet. But since that's the last leg of this stitch, I'm just going to yarn over and go into the next space and create my cluster. See it split. Okay, so that's when you stop, pull back, do it again. All right, so there's our cluster. Make a corner. Make a side, and now it's really starting to get larger because we're making more clusters on the sides, and so our granny square is growing. Typically granny squares are usually about 4 to 6 rounds, I would say 5 on average, and you know, it's very appealing to have multiple colors in your color story with your blanket or your granny square sweater, whatever you're making with your granny squares. But in this instance, because I am the frugal stitcher, this particular yarn only have this color and white. I decided to just do the solid peach because I knew I had enough to make all of the squares that I would need for my baby blanket, and I only have 1 skein of white. So hopefully we're not going to play yarn chicken to finish off this blanket. And by that I mean, I'm assuming that I have enough to do a join as you go border around all of my squares so that the peach is the center color and then the white will be the border color. And that'll be my next tutorial. I'm going to do a join as you go that doesn't require anything to start you off. It's just all of your finished squares set out in a grid, and then it's a nice little up and down, side to side, join as you go, which I've actually never done before, so that's going to be new for me. And I love learning new things. That's the thing about crochet, is once you've mastered the basics, you can go off and learn different skills. And you know, part of different skills is not just learning stitches, but learning little tricks. And I'm going to show you a trick at the end to make a seamless, perfect granny square. Okay, now we've reached our initial starting position, and because that is the last leg of our cluster, I only need to make 2 double crochets in this space. And now I am going to join with a slip stitch to the top of our chain 2, which made our double crochet, insert my hook into the top of that space, and then slip through the top of the last leg that I created. And now we're in our final round, and we're going to chain 2 one more time, yarn over, and insert back directly into that space, because this first chain 2 is going to count as our first double crochet in this cluster. Okay, so now we're going to just finish off this last round, round number 5. And then at the end, I'm going to show you that trick that I mentioned about making a perfect seamless granny square. All right, now we're getting back to the beginning, and our final round is about to end. I'm creating this last granny cluster, and I am going to join with a slip stitch to the beginning of our first cluster of round 5, going straight into the center and then pulling through. Now this is something, and I'm not going to complete this stitch, but this is something that you would do if like for instance, in my Join As You Go blanket, I'm going to be crocheting another cluster right into that chain space. So you're not going to see the bump that's created by this. And what I mean is, I'll show you in another example. Right here, there is a bump. There is this space where it's kind of hard to tell where the V would be because you've got a little knot that's living on half of this V that you would otherwise be able to sew into or crochet into. The other V's are nice and open, but this one is, it's got that knot over it. And I have sewn in my ends with these, and I do plan on crocheting just straight into this chain space, so I don't need these V's. I'm gonna go right through the chain spaces. But if you did want to create, for instance, a single crochet border in a different color, you would need access to these V's. And because this one has this knot over it, sometimes it can be hard to tell when you're sewing a blanket together or when you're adding a border where to put your crochet hook. There's really not enough space to get in there. So I'm going to show you a different method. This is definitely the tried and true method of just, ending your final round, and it's okay as long as you can get around it. As a beginner though, I always had tremendous difficulty trying to figure out how to crochet into that space, and especially before I learned how to properly weave in my ends, I really had a hard time figuring out what to do. I made life very difficult for myself. So at this point, I've just cut my tail. I've cut a really nice long tail. Instead of pulling through and ending this round, what I'm going to do is take out my hook and I'm going to pull back a few stitches. So I'm just going to frog back to the space where we were about to join. Okay, so now I have my two unconnected squares. All right, so I'm going to introduce our needle now. And I'm going to pull out this bit of our tail. It's coming out. Okay, so now our tail is secured to nothing. It's just coming straight out of this leg, and you can see the last stitch that I went through is starting to separate. That's okay. So when you pull it tight, okay, it looks like a normal, granny cluster. I'm going to take my tail and fold it over the edge of my needle to create a smaller point at which I insert it into the center. If you've ever had trouble threading a needle by just sticking in the ends that can be rough and come apart, this is the best way to do it. Just fold it over your needle and then stick it through. Okay, so I've got this. This is called an invisible join. So I've got this on my needle. I've got my strand. I'm going to ignore this chain 2 double crochet. I'm going to go from the back into the top of the second double crochet into this first major V stitch that I can see, and I'm going to insert, pull through. Okay, so now they're kind of close to each other, they're kind of connected. All right, and now I'm going to go into the top of this V, into the top, and then through the loop underneath. Okay, so I'm going into the top, through the loop underneath. So I've got 2 loops on my needle, and then I'm going to pull through here. So what this does, when you cinch it all together, it creates a V, a perfect V that lines up with that first double crochet, that first chain 2 that I made. So now you have a seamless invisible join that you can sew into, crochet into. It looks exactly like its neighbors. And since we've gone through the front here, what I like to do is travel down, follow the path of the strand and travel down and just insert it into the center of our chains or stitches at the bottom. And the best thing to do when weaving in your ends is to cut through the yarn. So you're kind of like mashing it together. it's sort of like gone through this one strand of yarn, it's split it a little bit. And that's great because when you wash it, especially this value yarn for sure, it has a lot of fibers that will just adhere to each other like Velcro. So now I've gone through all of these strands at the bottom, and you get a nice little seamless look. You can hardly tell where that's gone in. So now what I'm going to do is show you just how to weave in your ends. So what I like to do is maybe catch a loop nearby. I've gone in one direction. Now I've caught a loop nearby, and I'm going to go back in the opposite direction. So this will make it a lot harder for the strand to come undone. I like to loop my strand around things so that it's sort of tight, tucked in place. Again, I'm going to find a loop over here, go through it, and then turn back in the opposite direction and go back where I came from and try and push my needle through some of these fibers so that they're, they're splitting. Because again, when you wash it later on, these are all going to connect to each other, and they're going to just like adhere like Velcro so that it won't come apart. Again, I'm going to just like push my needle through in the opposite direction, and I'm really like mashing it through the strands. So I think that's pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to cut this off. And now I'm going to weave in this end for you so that you can see how this is done properly as well. So again, I'm going to have my strand go over my needle. I'm going to squeeze it down, pinch it, push through the hole. It's the easiest way to thread a needle. All right, and now I can see the direction the strand is coming from. It's coming from the right, so I'm going to go clockwise, and I'm going to push my needle in the middle. I don't want it to come out the front. We're just pushing through the middle, turning, pushing through, and then as you push through and you pull out, just cinch that center even more tightly. So that is definitely never gonna create a hole, like when I've done this before when I've made a blanket where I used really soft yarn. And because the yarn is so soft, it doesn't have that like slight pilling effect where it becomes like Velcro. So then yeah, after a couple washings, sometimes your yarn is gonna loosen up and you're gonna see holes. I've actually even had to sew my hole back together with different yarn because it came apart so badly because it was so soft. And this is like the trick. This is the marketing trick that everyone needs to be aware of when they're crocheting with yarn or doing anything with yarn. A lot of times companies will make you think, oh yeah, this yarn is so soft and lovely. Okay, it is at first, but then when you wash it, like especially if it's a baby blanket, babies will get sick on their blanket. You have to wash it. It's not that precious. It needs to be a practical thing that you use every day. And when you wash it a million times, like that really soft yarn that was super, super soft in the beginning, it does not end up soft. Like after several washings, it's not as soft anymore. And the funny thing about value yarn is everyone's like, oh, it's scratchy and hard. That's part of the dyeing process. So I'm just gonna clip this end off. That's part of the dyeing process. And the way that you get your value yarn to be really soft is when you're done and you've completed your project, you just soak it in a little bit of like room temperature water with a cupful of white distilled vinegar. And the vinegar breaks down the chemicals that they use in the dyeing process. And then it becomes ultra, ultra soft. Because like yarn is naturally going to be soft. Even acrylic yarn will be so, so soft. So in my process, what I like to do is wash it with a little bit, like I soak it for an hour or so in vinegar and water, and then I'll take like shampoo or body wash and some, I'll even use like conditioner and just like really like mash it up, let it soak a little bit, and then rinse it. If you're making a blanket, it's going to be really heavy, so try and squeeze out as much water as you can at the end, and then you can put it in the washing machine on gentle, and that will help to like rinse all of that residue off. And then you can pop it in the dryer on low. Like don't use high heat obviously on a blanket, but just pop it in the dryer on low, and then when it comes out, it is the softest thing you've ever touched in your life. Okay, can you even tell where we began? Can you even tell? Because every side looks exactly the same. At this point, if I wanted to, I could sew all of my squares together just as they are. I could add a single crochet border, and I would have no idea where we stopped. As opposed to this one, where I can definitely tell this is the knot. This is the space. I can barely see that V. But it's not going to matter, because the next stage in my project is going to be adding a white border with my big twist value yarn, and I'm going to use up this yarn in my stash and make a really cute but basic baby blanket. So thank you for joining me in this tutorial, and I'm going to be filming another one where I do a join as you go. All right, everybody, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye.